My name is Samir, and I have the pleasure of being the Mapleflow product manager. I've been with Mapleflow ever since its inception, ever since we released the first version in 2021. And under my guidance, we've released successive versions. Now, the buck with Mapleflow stops with me. Anything you like about the product, anything you don't like about the product, any new features that you want to see in Mapleflow, the buck stops with me. So I want to encourage everyone to send me your feedback. So send me your comments, send me your reports, tell me what you want to see and what you don't like in Mapleflow. What I'm going to do right now is actually place a few links into the chat window in Zoom. You can contact me through all of those channels. You can also email me at mapleflowpm@maplesoft.com. So feel free to give us your feedback, and I'll be more than happy to take all of your ideas, log them, and see if we can get them into Mapleflow in some version in the future. Now, I'm going to switch out of this slide and I'm going to dive straight into Mapleflow. Now, we've had lots of feedback from our users about Mapleflow over the last 12 months, and I want to share some of that feedback as well. So I'd like to talk about a number of Mapleflow features that our users like, and I'm going to illustrate that through this application, which is part of our application gallery. So feature number one, the equations that you enter into Mapleflow look like real equations. They're readable. You have overline division, subscripts, superscripts of powers. The equations are very readable and can be easily audited. Number two, Mapleflow understands units. So here you can see that I've entered some temperatures in Kelvin. I have some volumetric flow rate in meters cubed per second. I have a pressure here in pascals. If I wanted to, I could chop and change units. So instead of my pressure being in pascals, I could specify the pressure in bar instead. So I could say the pressure here is 1 bar. As soon as I make that change cascades down the length of my Mapleflow canvas, and it does all the unit conversions, and all the downstream computations update accordingly. This result here is given in kilojoules per kilogram. If I wanted to, I could change this to kilojoules per pound, and it does all the unit conversion for me. The third feature that our users like is the variables palette here. This lists all the parameters that you've defined in your worksheet at the point of the cursor. So if I click here at the very top, the variables palette is empty. That's because I haven't defined any variables at this point. But if I click here at this point, I've defined a couple of temperatures. And if I click right at the bottom, you can see all of the parameters I've defined in my worksheet together with their values. Number 4, there are many formatting options, document formatting options in Mapleflow that let you create clean-looking, mathematically live technical documents. You can have sections, images, text, and there are lots of customization options as well. So these lines that you see here are actually section lines. If I wanted to, I could double-click on a section line to collapse it, and I can double-click on it to expand it again. If I want to see more section formatting options, I can go to the Format menu and select Section Style, and this menu pops up on screen, which allows you to change the appearance of section lines. Another formatting option that many people enjoy using is the ability to selectively hide and display commands. So for example, if I right-click on this seems to be an evaluation. let me show the command under the hood. There. What you saw on screen actually had some code behind it, this code. But often there are instances when I don't necessarily want to see an equation or some code. So what I can do is right click on something like this and hide it. It's still there though. If I change a temperature, all the downstream results update accordingly, but I don't see any of the messy code. Number 5, you can actually generate high quality customizable plots and visualizations. This, for example, is a psychometric chart. It's one of Mapleflow's many built-in plotting tools. I can actually customize this plot, for example, with points and lines to indicate the flow of a thermodynamic process. If I change one of the upstream parameters, let's change this. Those changes are instantly reflected in this plot. And number 6, Mapleflow actually has a broad, flexible mathematical engine. There are many different mathematical tools in Mapleflow for solving equations, both numerically and symbolically, for working with matrices, for programming, solving differential equations. But one tool I use all the time is the thermophysical data package. So here I actually have a package or a group of commands which allows me to compute thermodynamic properties for pure fluids, fluid mixtures, crystalline solids, and more. There's a lot there. And this is just one of the many engineering calculation tools that we have in Mapleflow that you can take advantage of. So that was 6 things that our users have told us that they really enjoy about Mapleflow. What I'd like to do now is just jump into another worksheet and talk through some of the new features that we've put in the latest release of Mapleflow, Mapleflow 2024. And by the way, if you do have any questions while I'm giving this presentation, please do type them into the question and answer window in Zoom, and I'll be more than happy to address the questions either as I go along or at the end of the webinar. Now, what I have here isn't a comprehensive overview of all the new features in Mapleflow 2024. These are just some of the highlights. If you go to the What's New pages on our website, which I've linked to in the chat window, that gives a more comprehensive rundown of all the new features. But these are the new features that I, as a Mapleflow user, tend to use. Now, we can have scrollable matrices on output now. So here I've just generated a random matrix. It's a small matrix. It's just 5 by 5. But what happens if this is a bigger matrix? Let's change this to a 15 by 15 matrix. Well, the matrix gets larger, but now this output matrix is scrollable. I can actually scroll through all of the elements. What's really cool is that I can actually make this matrix smaller and larger through standard click and drag operations. I can also change the width of individual columns, like so, just by clicking and dragging, and the height of rows as well. You can see I have some column and row headers here as well. If I wanted to disable them, I can right click on this matrix and pick the appropriate option here. So let me just suppress the row header. And there you go, it's gone. Let's talk about argument completion next. So we have the concept of command completion and symbol completion in MapleFlow already. What does that mean? Well, if I type in the first few letters of a command, and I hit the command completion menu keystroke on my keyboard, which is Control Space or Escape, the command completion menu pops up on screen. These are the commands that would naturally be completed by what I've typed in. I just want to pick the first option. So I hit Tab. If I hit Control Space again, I see another command completion menu, which gives me the commands within this package. Let's select random matrix, hit Tab again. And now I can create my random matrix. Let's keep that simple. That was command completion. We already have that tool in MapleFlow. We also have something called symbol completion as well. If I type in sqrt, obviously that's shorthand for square root. If I hit Control Space on my keyboard, the symbol completion menu pops up on screen. If I want that typeset as a proper square root symbol, I'll simply pick the first option, and there you go. sqrt is changed into the proper square root symbol. If I type in delta with a capital D and press Control Space, that's changed into the Greek letter delta. So those were two really useful tools in MapleFlow already. But now we've enhanced this with command completion as well. Sorry, argument completion as well. What does that mean? Well, many MapleFlow commands have options. To know what those options are, in prior versions of MapleFlow, you'd have to go into the help window, search for the command, and look through all of the options and all of the potential results. Now, for many of MapleFlow's most commonly used commands, we have argument completion. That's a window that pops up when you type in a function name followed by an open bracket. So, for example, let me just quickly prototype something. So I'm just going to type in an expression. Now, let's say that I want to plot this. So I type in the plot command. And now, if I insert an open bracket, the argument completion menu pops up on screen. Let me pick the equation I've just defined, and that's listed in the argument completion menu. So if I press Tab, I get a reference to that name. If I press comma, I have a number of other options for the plot command. So let me change the line style. Obviously, that takes options as well. And let me change the color. And it just gives me a list of sample colors. So for this command, I don't have to look into the help files for all of the various option names. The options are given in the argument completion menu together with potential values as well. Here's another demonstration of argument completion. This time I'm going to go into the Tools menu and select Import Data. And I'm going to load an audio file. I'm going to give that audio file a name. And as soon as I click on Done, MapleFlow inserts the appropriate file import command on my worksheet. Let's say I wanted to plot a spectrogram of this audio file. Let's say I wanted to examine the time frequency contents of this audio file. Well, let me load the appropriate tool from the signal processing package. For this, I'm using command completion. As soon as I hit an open bracket, the argument completion menu pops up on screen, together with a reference to the audio file I've just imported. If I press comma again, you can see that there are a number of options. So I can change the FFT size, I can change the overlap with which the spectrogram is generated. So let's generate the spectrogram. And there we go. Now, we've already seen the benefit of the variables palette. We know that it lists all of the variables that we've defined in my worksheet at the point of the grid cursor. So here I've defined delta subscript x, y. If I click here, that disappears from the variables palette. If I move the cursor down, it knows that I've defined that parameter at that point. Let's say that I want to use this thing in my computations in an equation. To insert it, I can now just double click on the appropriate parameter in the variables palette. So if I double click this, it's inserted into my worksheet at the point of that grid cursor, and now I can use it in my computations. By the way, that isn't the only way of inserting predefined parameters into your worksheet. You could also use name completion as well. So if I type in delta, then I press Control Space to bring up the name completion menu. It knows at that point I've only defined one parameter that begins with capital delta. That gives me the only option, and now I can press Tab to select it, and again, it's inserted into my worksheet. Those are some really useful options that I, as a MapleFlow user, tend to use a lot. In prior versions of Flow, you could only change the units of that result if the result contained that number and that number alone. You couldn't, for example, change units if the result contained a vector. We've lifted that restriction in MapleFlow 2024. So here I defined a vector, and if I evaluate it, it gives me that. Obviously, I've defined a vector of speeds, velocities. Let's say I wanted to change all of the velocities in that vector to something else. Well, there's a really simple way I can do that with the context panel. So if I press End at this point and expand the context panel, you can see that the context panel lists unit conversion options. I can pick from a range of pre-built unit conversions, say miles per hour, kilometers per hour, or I can type in my own custom unit instead. So let's just change that to miles per hour, and there. So I can use the context panel if I want to change the units of everything in that vector. I can also change the units of individual elements as well. So for example, if I wanted to change the unit of the first result to, let's say, furlongs per day, so a length over time, I can simply change each unit individually as well. So I have two options for changing the units of a vector of results. I can use the context panel to change the units of everything in that vector, or I can click on individual elements and change units as well. On a related note, one of our attendees asks, can a vector also contain units of different dimensions? For example, meters, seconds, and kelvins. It absolutely can. So for example, I could define a vector using the matrix palette with a temperature, a speed, and an energy value. Moving on quickly. You might have noticed this when I was showing you a spectrogram earlier, but the spectrogram actually contains a color bar. That's a new feature in MapleFlow 2024. Many of our most common plots, such as 3D plots, contour plots, spectrograms, and so on, now automatically include a color bar. This color bar can be customized. So for example, you can change the spacing or the coloring, but it's a nice option which gives you an extra layer of information. Just to give you another example of color bars in plots, in this worksheet, I'm examining the torsion in a rectangular section. So if I scroll down, I see some 3D plots with color bars. And here I have a density plot with a color bar as well. And again, if I don't want to see any of the commands used to generate this plot, I can right click on this and select hide command. There, it's gone. It just gives me a cleaner looking plot. Here's a quick tip for you. If you just want to export this plot to an external file, if you just click on the plot and go to the context panel, the export option on the context panel lets you export this plot to an external file. I like exporting plots to an SVG format. That's a scalable vector graphics format. With an SVG picture, you retain your sharpness however much you zoom in or zoom out. The image maintains its crispness. You can also hyperlink from one part of a worksheet to another now, and I'll illustrate that with this worksheet. So this is a useful feature in MapleFlow 2024, for example, if you want to build up a table of contents. So here in this worksheet, I have a series of hyperlinks, which links to different sections in my worksheet. You can link to plots, equations, text, images. Here I have a link which allows me to go back to the top of a worksheet. But this is a really useful way of quickly navigating to different parts of a larger MapleFlow worksheet. This is something I've spoken about before, hiding commands. We've actually improved this functionality, so you can actually hide commands for many math containers at the same time. So if I drag a selection box around all of these commands, right-click on one and select hide command, that code disappears. And again, it's still there under the hood. So for example, I can change this temperature, and if I press enter, you can see the values changing. And again, somebody asks in the chat, how can you tell if an expression has been hidden? That's a really good question. If you go to the view menu and select visual indicators, you'll see gray circles on the top left-hand corner of any math with hidden parts. And finally, I want to share what I think is the one feature which has actually dramatically increased the quality of my life when I'm using MapleFlow. I can actually tear away tabs into new windows. So MapleFlow has a tabbed interface which lets you switch between different open applications. Now, in many modern web browsers, you can actually drag tabs away or tear them away into new browser windows. I can now do that in MapleFlow. So if I wanted to drag this tab into a new window, I can simply click and drag, and it appears in a new window. There. It's appeared on my second monitor, but there we go. So quite often, I like having two MapleFlow windows open side by side so I can copy and paste content from one MapleFlow application window into another. So what I often do is I often use the window snapping functionality to tile two MapleFlow windows side by side and copy content from one window to another. And tearing away tabs just makes that whole process a little bit easier. Now, that was a selection of some of the new features in MapleFlow 2024. There are many, many more new features since MapleFlow is built on top of the Maple programming language. You also have access to many new mathematical functions and features as well. What I wanted to do today is actually show you the new features that I enjoy using most of all. So improvements to hiding commands, the argument completion, being able to change results in matrices and vectors, and so on. So that was the end of my presentation. I can see a few questions coming into the Q&A window, so I just want to answer them. One delegate asks, how do you put tabs back after dragging them out? So at the moment, you can't do that, but that is an improvement that we hope to get into a future version of MapleFlow. So at the moment, you can drag tabs out into new application windows. In a future version, you'll be able to drag them back into an existing application window as well. Another delegate asks a really interesting question, and I'm going to read this question verbatim. Does MapleFlow provide an interface for document or file management systems, i.e. SAP or Teamcenter? Can headers and footers contain various document information managed through such systems? That is something that we've had requested from a number of our corporate customers who need to manage calculations, who need to track the flow of changes through a calculation. It is something that we've started to think about. We've started to consider the question, what PDM system shall we connect to? Is there a demand for this? If there's a specific PDM system that you want us to integrate with, then please do let us know. You can find my email address in the chat window. Okay, so one delegate asks, I've tried to get the absolute value of a complex number, but it didn't work. That should be easy enough. So for example, if I understand that question correctly, you want to do something like this. So here I have the absolute value of the complex number. Let me tell you what I did. If you type in ABS and press Control Space, you get the symbol completion menu. I'm going to pick the first option, which changes that into the typeset symbol for absolute value. I can then type in a complex number using I as the imaginary number, press equals, and it gives me the absolute value. I hope that answers your question. Another person asks, is there a way to insert a greater than or equal symbol? There is, yes. Typically, I use Boolean comparisons like that when I'm constructing a piecewise function. So let me just prototype one quickly. All right, so this is just a piecewise function. Let's say I want to return a value of 3 if x is greater than or equal to 5. So I type in x, I type in the greater than symbol. For the equal sign, it's control equals. So if I press control equals, that changes into the typeset greater than or equal to sign. Let's type in the rest. There we go. Incidentally, if I want to add more branches into this piecewise, I can right click on this and select insert a row above or insert a row below. This just allows me to make this piecewise expression more complex. One person asks if there are any tutorials or training seminars available. Well, within the product, we have a link to a series of built-in tutorials. These are rather simple and they're designed for novice users who want to learn how to drive the package, enter and edit expressions. It teaches you about the basic interface. If you go to the Help menu and select User Manual, this is a PDF user guide which takes you through the application, all the major parts of the interface. What I find really useful about the user manual are the list of keyboard shortcuts at the very end. There are lots of keyboard shortcuts in MapleFlow, and we don't expect you to remember all of them, but certainly there are many common keyboard shortcuts which make the experience of using MapleFlow much more fluid. Back to piecewise functions. The delegate asks a follow-on question. Is it possible to add more than 2 conditions? It is. So here I've added the condition, x is greater than or equal to 5. If I wanted to add more complexity into this, I'd type in and x less than or equal to 8. So after the first condition, I'd press space, I'd type in and, space again, and another condition. And to get the greater than or equal sign, I type in greater than, followed by control equals. That's greater than, Then you hold down the Control key and you press equals. One person asks, what packages from Maple don't work in MapleFlow? So MapleFlow supports a very large fraction of the Maple programming language, well over 95%. But there are packages in MapleFlow that don't. There are packages in Maple that don't work in MapleFlow. If you go to the user manual, I think in one particular section, I think it's in section 5.2, there's a selection of unsupported packages and keywords. This isn't comprehensive, but certainly what we've found, the packages and functions that most design engineers, most scientists want to use, they all work perfectly well in MapleFlow. Oh, back onto piecewise functions again. If you want to add more than 2 lines in the piecewise function, if you right-click on the piecewise function, you can select a new branch. So if I select Insert Row Below, that inserts a new branch into the piecewise, and I can just fill this in. So let's insert another conditional. There we go. So it's simply a case of right-clicking on the piecewise and selecting one of these two options, Insert Row Above or Insert Row Below. So I think that's all of the questions answered. I think if I haven't got to any of the questions, feel free to email me. I think one person said that some of the links weren't appearing correctly in the chat window. So what I will do is actually copy and paste them into my MapleFlow document, if you'll bear with me. So let me just insert a text container. Here are the links. If you want to email me directly, please use mapleflowpm@maplesoft.com. One final question that came through, and this is one that I think I missed earlier, so apologies. How do you bring up help for library functions in MapleFlow? Well, we have a help browser. If you go to Help, MapleFlow Help, you get a help browser. You can search for commands or use the tree browser to navigate to different commands. This isn't a comprehensive list of all the commands in the MapleFlow programming language. There are more commands that you can find in our online help system. What we hope to do in the short to medium term is bring more of the online help to the in-product help. So you'll find more help pages inside MapleFlow.